If you want to win big, personally and professionally, you're in the right place. Today's guest, Mr. Timothy Parker, he is definitely winning big, and he's here to open up to you about his principles of winning. Welcome in. I'm Desmond Clark, the host of Principles of Winning, where we interview highly successful entrepreneurs, executives, athletes, politicians, and entertainers to discern the principles and disciplines that they apply in their personal and professional lives to create the mountains of success they've experienced so we can continue to develop ourselves personally and professionally for the successful playbooks of our own lives. Before we get started with this interview, I just want to say a big thank you to Jeremy Sizemore for coming on last week and giving us a great interview and so many nuggets of wisdom to become a successful entrepreneur. This episode of Principles of Winning is brought to you by Desmond Clark Speaks, or Des Clark Speaks. Des Clark Speaks is your preferred keynote speaker and corporate team development specialist. We help executive team leaders create pinnacle team success by establishing principles of winning. If you want to learn more about how we help executive leaders like you build championship level corporate teams, go to www.desclarkspeaks.com for more information and sign up for our free executive roundtables. Now let's get to our guest. This outstanding man here and an outstanding executive who we have coming on today. First, I owe a big debt of gratitude to because he hired me and he trusted me to speak at his first inaugural event that we're going to talk about, which he and his team was responsible for coordinating for nationwide insurance. I just want to thank you for that. And I'm thanking Mr. Timothy Parker. He is the Chief of Staff for the Office of President and Chief Operating Officer for Nationwide Insurance. So without any further ado, let's bring on my man, Timothy Parker. How you doing?
Hey, Desmond. How are you? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, man. And we met back in October because we were both at a conference. I was speaking there. You was attending it. And over these last 6 months, it seems like I've been knowing you for like years now because we had the opportunity to talk on many occasions and get to know each other. So, brother, I just want to say thank you for your friendship and thank you for coming on to In the Huddle, not In the Huddle, Principles of Winning. Yes. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I agree with you. There's sometimes you meet people and you just absolutely connect with them. And we have connected and we've definitely had a burgeoning friendship over the last several months. So I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, I just don't appreciate you dodging me down in Miami when I told you I was coming on a Tuesday. You was like, "Oh, I gotta leave on a Monday," so we didn't get to cross path right there and get to hang out, with no agenda. One of those type of hangouts. So we're gonna make it happen pretty soon. But man, let's get into this interview. Sure. I know that you were and are very excited about what went on just at the beginning of this month, and I'm talking about the inaugural distribution summit for Nationwide. Talk to me about that. What was so exciting about that for you?
Well, what was really exciting for me was we have all been through a unique experience. It's a chapter in history books, the pandemic. So a lot of people have not been able to get together in person. So the property and casualty group at Nationwide, which is about 10 to 12,000 employees, far flung across the country. We've not had any large meetings since January 2020, which is right before the pandemic. So midway through 2023, my boss, who's the president of Nationwide Property and Casualty, had a vision. He wanted to get folks together from across the country, was his idea. And the charge was, Timothy, go do it, make it happen. So what was really exciting about it is I did have an internal partner in the company who had been through lots of different sales conferences. So her perspective was really helpful. But it was my job to pull together content to make sure that we had the right internal and external speakers. I pulled together an advisory council, which is really important. We'll talk about that. In order to be successful, you can't always do it by yourself. You always have to have a team. You're an athlete. So, individual success is as good as you are as part of a team. So I
Right.
did a council to talk about what were the pluses, the minuses, the puts and takes. And then long story short, we got to January and we had about 425 or so associates from across the country at different levels that came together for the first time in 4 years. Some people had joined the company, so they had never been in a meeting with many of these people for the first time. This was the first time for them to see many people. And we had our super successful meeting. I would say that not only did you knock the ball out of the park, but I would say overall, there was great satisfaction with getting together in person. The overall content where we met in Houston, which is a lot warmer than Columbus, Ohio. Just the
Absolutely.
facility, the technology, everything that we were able to do really has set us off on a great course. And I can still feel the energy in the building on conference calls. And this is now 3-4 weeks later. People are really charged up about the distribution summit that we had. So I got to see it or hear about it from being a vision and bullet points on a page to making it come to reality. And our theme was, again, aligning visions and achieving excellence. And people are really charged up about that and make a lot of different references to the summit, to the external and the internal speakers and the content. So that it's great when you can bring something to fruition from just a concept to making it a reality. And when it impacts people, that's super energizing and very satisfying. So that is probably the thing that I've been most excited about from a workplace perspective in recent weeks.
And personally, you are this extrovert, right? You're this outgoing person. People who meet you, you don't meet strangers, but you say that you're really excited, and you gotten really excited by exploring your introvert side of yourself. Tell me more about that.
So during the pandemic, and you're right, I am an extrovert. I love people. I'm energized by people. During the pandemic, just like I said, we couldn't get together for work. I was just sort of in the house by myself. Lots of FaceTime, lots of team meetings, teams on MS Teams, lots of virtual stuff, but spending a lot of time really in solitude. And that didn't turn out to be a bad thing. I actually am pretty comfortable with self. I like self.
Mhm.
And I learned that carving out a good amount of time for solitude and self care is a really good thing. So now that we're back outside, and I'm known for being outside, like I was in Miami, it's really important to carve out time to really recharge. So that's one of the things that I've learned to embrace my inner introvert and make sure that I don't have to be with people all the time. Sometimes the best people or person to be with is self. And so I would say
Mm.
that was one of my key learnings or a byproduct from the pandemic that I didn't even know that I needed to learn. So embracing my inner introvert has been a really good thing for me.
Your title is Chief of Staff for the President and the COO of Nationwide. Um, that comes with a lot of responsibility, right? I'm just assuming, and we could get into that later. But with all of that responsibility, learning how to be in solitude, learning how to have that self care, how has that helped change you and to make you better, or how did it develop you? Did it make you better? What part of that goes back into your professional life that you say, "Hey, I'm glad that in my personal life I had the opportunity to do that because it made me better in my professional life."
Definitely, really good question. Learning to embrace that inner introvert or being by myself or having solitude There's a lot of times where if you're the chief of staff, you're expected to be the gatekeeper. You don't generally have a team of direct reports. You have to do things by influence. And sometimes there's not a lot of people to bounce things off of. You have to rely on your own judgment. And also with your boss, there is a great amount of confidence that is expected. So there are not a lot of people that you see, you read, you experience things that you just can't boldly walk out and share the rest with the rest of the team. So being comfortable with self, being comfortable with confidence, being comfortable in all those places, being that in my personal world definitely translates over well to the professional world. You have to be really comfortable with self and confidence, and oftentimes a lot of solitude, and deferring to self sometimes is really important. So there's a balance. You want to work with the team. You got to be a good team player, but there's a lot of times that you have to count on self as well.
And now we're talking about the Timothy Parker present day. Take me back to Timothy Parker, 20 years ago, when Timothy Parker was looking to climb that corporate ladder, looking to have that bigger position, more responsibility. What was it like at the beginning, before, when you first entered into this market? Tell me, where did you enter in? And then what were the keys behind your ascension to get to where you're at now?
Wow. Well, 20 years ago, I never would have guessed that I would be living in the Midwest, first of all, nor would I have guessed that I was working for a mutual insurance company. So those are some of the things that I wouldn't have guessed, but I have a really comfortable life in the Midwest. And I work for a Fortune 75 company that is one of the strongest enterprises in the country, which is great. So even though I would not have imagined it, where I am now is very, very satisfying from a personal and a professional perspective. 20 years ago, I was working exclusively in finance. I started my career in finance. I have an MBA in finance, and I've worked in corporate finance. I've worked in FP&A, and I think my vision was maybe I'm going to be a CFO. I didn't think about maybe there's an opportunity for me to think about being a chief operating officer, being a chief administrative officer. I knew that somewhere along the way I wanted to be the chief something, and I still think that, and that's what I prepare for. So even though I would not have been able to be the architect of exactly what my title was or where I wanted to be, I think the path that I've been on has been very clear that I'm very analytical. I am very strategic and forward thinking. I like to be impactful to people. And even though I don't manage a team right now, I've got a lot of experience of managing people. Even though I don't manage directly, but I manage very indirectly for self and on behalf of my boss as well. So I think all of those things have built me into being a pretty successful role and successful at what I do today.
What's you say that you see yourself, and you're still pursuing to have that chief in front of whatever else it is. What's the drive behind that?
I've always been really disciplined from a kid as a student. I was never go do your homework. I was always the one that was, not only am I going to do my homework, I got to do it well. So I think about that in the workplace. I'm not going to do just my job, but I really want to do it well. And I just want to continue to keep climbing. So I think that's what the drive is, more than having a title. I want to do something that's very impactful. So even if it doesn't turn into a title that's chief, like I said, I would not have been able to pinpoint exactly the title or the company or the location where I am now. I think in essence, the kind of work that I do is right along the path that I've been preparing for and what I've been prepared for. So we'll see where the rest of my career takes me. But I think it will definitely be analytical, strategic, forward thinking, and impactful to people.
You keep using this word impactful, and I love that you're using this word impactful. Do you, because I want this to come off. No, I'm just saying, like, I'm thinking today there's such a low freaking bar for people that want to make a difference, for people to want to do things at such a high standard, right? I feel like anybody who wants to do anything at a higher standard, carry themselves at that high standard, is is an advantage for you right now, because I think that the bar is low. Do you believe having that standard and being willing to want to be impactful directly influence how you were able to navigate the corporate structure to be where you're at today?
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. Standards are not, in my opinion, as high as they should be. Now I sound old school, like my parents or my grandparents. Now I feel like I sound like them because I think generationally, we always say that, wow, things used to be, or standards used to be. So I hold a very high standard for self, which is critically important. And I never really erode that. When we met in Houston for the meeting, a lot of times people said, "Well, are you nervous about this detail or that detail?" And I thought, no. One, I don't have time to be nervous because I got to make sure I know everything from bottom all the way to the top and everything in between, where the soft spots are, where the risks are. And that's because that was Timothy knowing that, yeah, I really own this. If everything goes well, that's going to be great. If something falls apart, it's going to be on me. So that's kind of the difference. If everything goes well, it's not like I'm going to take all the credit. I think that's
Right.
great. But if something goes wrong, I think the finger gets pointed here. So that's one of the reasons why I have a very high standard for work. I've always had a very high standard for education. I tell people when they're thinking about where they want to go to school or what they want to do, I just say, aim as high as you can go. Because if you don't aim as high as you can go, you don't know exactly where you're going to land. So that's my mantra. Always aim as high as you can go. So that's what I continue to do as a student, as a professional, as an executive.
And if you had to, well, let me start here. So as we're talking, it seems like it was a straight line to where you're at. I'm sure that that's not the case. So in between, hey, where you started to where you're at now, there had to be some struggles, and I feel like you win. And I have the definition right up here. Man, you might have talked about this before. The definition, the origin definition of win is to gain and succeed through struggle or by struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So what were some of those, or one or two of those very important struggles early on that you had to overcome that catapulted you to the next level?
So, yeah, success is definitely not linear. It definitely meanders sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And without naming any specific companies, there have been times that I've worked for a company and I'm like, maybe I landed here because I was chasing money and that wasn't the right thing to do because it wasn't the right fit for me. Or maybe I ended up with a boss that, and you and I talked about this, that wasn't fair. What does fair mean?
Yeah.
And maybe I stayed too long with that particular boss. Or sometimes when you are focused on making sure that you're successful and you're the best, sometimes you fight against something that's not worth fighting against. So there have been times where I probably should have thrown in the towel on a particular role or boss or company and moved on sooner. So those are some of the times where you get a little bit deflated. But when I look back in general, there's not anything that I would say that that was an abject failure because I'm
Mm-hmm.
always going to learn, hey, you know what? I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to
Right.
find myself in that place again. And if success had been just linear and I had just gone straight to where I am now, I wouldn't be able to share the stories. I wouldn't be able to be the mentor that I am. So, yeah, there are times, I can't say that there was any time that I thought, wow, I just feel completely lost. But there were times when I say, gosh, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I'm fighting through this. But that's where it's really important to have mentors. It's really important that's when it's important not to be in solitude and by
Right.
yourself. It's important to have people to, not everyone needs to know everything, but somebody needs to know something. Somebody needs to know if you're struggling, if you're frustrated, someone that can help you sort it out. And I've always had at least one mentor that I could always go and talk to, in addition to friends and family. But it's always important to have a professional mentor that you can lean into and talk to, someone that is wiser than you are.
All right. Got more experience, did a few
Absolutely.
more things, got a few more victories up under their belt. Probably got some losses too that they learned from, all of that good
Absolutely.
stuff.
If you talk to someone and they don't have any losses, they're either deceiving themselves or they are definitely trying to trick you.
Go the other way.
Yeah.
Go the other way. Find somebody else who got some battle scars.
You
You
know what I
mentioned
wish though?
uh,
I am a mentor to a couple of folks, and I think about some of the things that I share based on my experiences. And I probably wish that I had leaned into folks that were more transparent as mentors earlier in my career. That would have
mhm,
been helpful, because you look at some people and say that person is wildly successful. I can't wait to get to be like Mr. X or Ms. X. And then you find out, well, for everyone, success
mhm.
is not linear. I think it's really important to be transparent.
Absolutely. And as a mentor, if I feel like if you're going to be a good mentor, you have to be transparent, or you're not doing your mentee the justice, because you don't want to paint a rosier picture than what it is. I know we live in this world where everything is, hey, do this. No time needed, no effort needed. It's easy. These 3 steps, and that's the world that we live in. And it seems like a lot of times we get caught up in that we expect it or want it to be easy. And me and my wife had this conversation a couple of weeks ago as she's getting her master's degree, and she was saying, "Well, the people that I talked to said that it's going to be relatively easy." I was like, "Don't go into it with that thought process. Go into it with the mindset that let me find out what's going to be difficult, because we can handle easy, right?
Mhm.
We can handle easy all day, but let me find out. Let me ask the questions about what's going to be difficult, and now
Mhm.
let's game plan around that to make sure that we're ready for that part, and so we don't get blindsided with the easy." So when you say being transparent, I'm taking that as, hey, you're giving them the whole entire picture, not just the picture that looks good in this nice pretty frame.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
you got to balance it as well. Like you can be smart. You definitely want to let your brilliance shine. You never want to cover that up. Sometimes it's not cool to be the smart kid in class. Sometimes it's not cool to sit in the front of the classroom. Well, you know what? I've never been afraid to be the smart kid in class or to sit in the front of the
Were
classroom.
you one of those kids that sat in the front?
I always sat in the front, but I was always quasi popular too. So I was never
Okay.
shunned.
I, I
So
I never
I
sat
still
in the
sit up
front.
front.
I
I
was one
still
of those
sit up front.
kids. I was one of those kids that, hey, I just got to admit it. I can't sit up front, man. That's not cool.
You
Out
won't remember, but at the conference that we met at, guess where I was sitting?
up front.
Front table.
Yeah. Now today, I'll sit up front. So I'll tell you, when I was like in high school and even in college for most of the time, I was one of those lazy smart people. Only put in enough effort to do a good enough job, right? To make a good enough grade to where it's satisfactory. But anytime I had to turn it up, I was able to turn it up. Like my senior year, I passed my SAT first time, no problem. But then they said, okay, with that score, you got to have a certain GPA. So my senior year, I made all A's and B's. I only made a few B's. I had never done that before in since the third grade. Then when I get to college, I struggled a little bit. My freshman the first semester, because I was playing football, new life. I was on academic probation. Think I was ever on academic probation ever again? No, I just turned it up. So I was one of those people that I was lazy smart, and then I wanted to be cool, but not the dummy that was acting crazy. So that was me in high school.
I think I sit up front one because I don't want to be distracted. I don't sit up front because I can't see. Yeah, I wear glasses, but I can see. I sit up front not because I'm trying to be the teacher's pet, because then that's not cool. Um,
Mm-hmm.
But I sit up front because I don't want to be distracted, even when I'm at church. And I doubt that my pastor's even going to be watching this podcast or listening to this. But
What's his name? I'll send it to him.
we'll keep that undercover. But anyway, I sit up front at church because I don't want to be distracted. I just want to focus. So when I sit up front, it puts me in a zone where I can just focus. So I think that's really important to make sure that whatever is going to get you, like you said, you didn't want to be too much of the smart kid. But I think I would always tell people, don't ever always let your brilliance shine. Just let it shine, because you're going to come up against some cases where there's going to be someone that's smarter. There's a class that's harder. So if you let your brilliance shine, the next thing that you're going to have to do when it gets tough is you got to let your resilience prevail, because your brilliance is going to take you only so far. But then there's going to be times where you need resilience, and then you got to let your resilience prevail. That's when, when there's a downsizing at work and your name is on the list, and it has nothing to do with you being smart. When you have a boss that is really, quote unquote, unfair or doesn't like you for any particular reason. I'm someone that I tend to think of myself as likable. I'm comfortable in that space. I'm not for everybody. Not everyone is like me. And then you come up against something like that. If you don't let your resilience prevail, that's when you fall apart. So yeah, you got to let your brilliance shine, and you got to let your resilience prevail.
I want to jump back into something that you mentioned a few minutes ago about chasing money. So there's going to be a young business guy, business woman that's watching this show, and they're going to have to make that decision between, hey, do I go get another $10,000, or do I look to somewhere where I can add value, or there's a smarter path to get to where I'm going? From what you said, you felt like one time you might have been chasing money. If you're giving that person that's listening now the advice of, hey, go chase the money or go somewhere where you can make impact, what would your advice be?
Just a little bit of a balance. You don't want to cheat yourself. Or I say, here's where you don't, even if you don't think about it from a money perspective, don't live below your privilege. Again, if you're leaning into your brilliance and letting that shine, you're not going to let yourself stay and stagnate in a role or a career that is below whatever privilege that is. If you're going to chase after a job for $10,000, you're probably cheating yourself. Are you worth more than $10,000? Yep, you should be worth more than that. But if there's nothing the matter with going for an opportunity that is significantly more lucrative, but make sure that it's lucrative and aligned with what you want to do. Otherwise, when you get into the new role and you're getting the new paycheck, it's going to wear thin after a while if it's not aligned with something that you want to do, and something that's aligned, not necessarily with your morals, with your values, or what you want to do in your career. So just be very careful about making the moves that you make, and make sure that the shiny new object, if it's $10,000, think about, am I worth more than $10,000? Because if you're smart and you work hard and you're strategic, opportunities are going to come your way. You have to be very strategic about your networking and how you maneuver through your career.
Yeah, I just want to say hello to Latifa Grundy. She said, hey, Timothy Parker, Black Excellent, keep letting your brilliance shine and blazing the trail for the next generation. So I just want to say that because she came in with that. Earlier, we talked about being right and being fair, and you mentioned it a little bit with people making layoffs. And then if your name's on that layoff, it may not be fair to you, but it may be the right decision for the company to make. And I bring this up because even with my own company, we were just doing our value statements, and one of my teammates said, hey, I think we should have fairness as part of the value statement. And I just want to get your take on this. And I said to him, I don't believe in fair. I don't believe in fair, especially in business, because you can't always be fair. You can always do the right thing, but you can't always be fair. When I say to you, I don't believe in fairness because of those reasons, what thoughts come to mind for you?
Kind of the same thought that when you posed that the first time when we were talking. I definitely have to listen to understand that one, and I've got to think about it as opposed to just challenging it. I think that there's an opportunity in many cases to be right and fair, but I
Mm-hmm.
bet I can think of some examples where they might collide, and they're not necessarily going to happen. I think about being a mentor and having someone come to me and saying, "Oh my goodness, I'm about to get laid off," or "My name was on the list and I got laid off." And I wouldn't have been able to respond appropriately and let them know that that's not the end of the world if I hadn't been through that.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of people that I know that have not somewhere along the way had something that happened and their name is on the list. But lo and behold, there could be a couple months later that instead of saying, "Hey, I'm going to chase money or I'm going to chase another career," sometimes your name's on a list and it opens the door for you for a much greater opportunity. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of thinking about this is where you let your resilience prevail, instead of thinking, oh, the world has come to an end, there's lots of companies that are out there that are going to be wanting your particular skill. So in the moment, you might be thinking that something might not be fair to you individually, but how can you leverage it into launching yourself into a different place, into a better role, something that is better, probably beyond your wildest dreams?
Right.
I think if
Absolutely.
you don't go through that, you probably can't provide the requisite advice to someone.
I know you're a man of faith. I'm a man of faith, and they say when one door closes, another door opens.
Oh, absolutely.
So, so I think that sums up really what you're talking about. But you just got to be willing to go and find that open door.
Hmm.
Um, Now you're in a leadership position. You don't necessarily manage a team per se, but you do manage people through what you have to do for your boss, right? How would you characterize your leadership style?
I definitely lead through collaboration. I'm definitely not dictatorial, but I'm very directive. So, yep, I'm pleasant to be around. I am generally pretty fun around the water cooler, but I'm definitely pretty directive and decisive. And I think that's really important. Someone has got to be directive and decisive. And you can do that without being dictatorial. So I would say that's my style. I'm collaborative. Like I'll take in lots of input, but when it's time to make the decision, if it's my job to make the decision, I'm absolutely going to step into that role. And I've led pretty large teams. I've had great bosses and I've had really poor bosses. And the great bosses, I think, hey, what nugget can I take from their style that I'm going to apply and maybe hone and make it mine? And who are the poor bosses that I've had? How do I avoid repeating that behavior? So if you ask me what kind of leader or what kind of manager I am, I'm really very introspective. There is
Mhm.
a quote by another motivational speaker. I listen to other speakers besides you, Desmond. His
Man,
name is,
I
and
thought I had a monopoly on that.
he's got a quote. And he says, "What does it look like on the other side of me?" That's roughly the quote. So I always
Mhm.
think about, well, what does it look like on the other side of me? If you're sitting across the desk and I'm the manager, what do I sound like? How do I come across? So that's the kind of manager I am. I'm always introspective, thinking about what can I take from the best that works for me and make it work for my style, and what are the things that may not be the best that may be a part of my style that I can avoid. What are things that I see? We all see things in bosses that we're like, yeah, I don't like the way they did that. I don't like the way that they approach that, or they really seem unfair. How do I
Mhm.
avoid those sorts of things? So I'm an introspective leader.
And you mentioned the word, hey, you're very directive, right? You're not afraid to make the decision. You intake whatever perspectives from different team members, but when it's time to make a decision, you're very decisive. You make that decision. What is it about you that when you make a decision, people go along with it and trust your decision?
I think one thing, because of who I am, I'm very disarming. You got to be very self aware. Um, I am a not so small Black man in corporate America. I need to be very self aware. So I'm very disarming. So there's a great amount of authenticity that comes through. So if I'm being firm, I'm being authentic. I'm not being dictatorial. So that's probably the third prong of things that I would say, like lean into your brilliance, resilience, and then authenticity. If you are authentic and have an authentic spirit in the way that you lead, the way that you command respect, the way that your presence is, then you don't come across as being dictatorial. And then you have the leeway and the freedom to be very directive. People know that when they give a lot of input, that you have thought about it and your direction is going to be coming from a good place.
Authentic. Um, there's another word that mirrors that just a little bit. Being vulnerable. Also, are you a vulnerable type leader? If so, or if not, well, let's go with if so. How does that help you be a leader? And if not, how does that help you be a leader?
I bet I'm going to have to say I'm probably not a vulnerable leader. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
facade, but I definitely come across as being very strong, very confident, exuding a good amount of executive presence. I think in order for people to have confidence in you, you have to exude a great amount of confidence, not necessarily arrogance, but
Mm-hmm.
there can be a little humble brag in there sometimes. But I would probably say, if you ask me, am I a vulnerable leader? I'm probably going to lean away and say, I can't think of any examples where I have been vulnerable in the workplace or come across as a vulnerable leader. I'd have to think about whether or not that's a good thing. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, and when I say vulnerability, it almost, like I say, mirrors authenticity. Where, hey, you feel like you feel, you say what you say, you do what you do. There is no there's no pretense, there's no disguise. Hey, if I come into work and we're having a bad day, I'm willing to say, hey, I'm having a real shitty day, but I'm not gonna necessarily make your day shitty because mine is. But I'm vulnerable and authentic enough to say that. And I've had to do that before when I came in office, bad day at home or whatever, or
Mhm.
something happened, you know, tell the guys right away, man, it's not a real good day for me. Just
So
I
that's
just want you guys to
interesting.
know.
That definitely is a departure from who I am in the workplace. I have gone to work the day after personal tragedy, and no one would have any idea. People generally don't know if I'm having a fantastic day or
Mhm.
or right after tragedy. I'm pretty even keel. I feel like one of the things I like about the relationship I have with my boss is that I know who he is every day and he knows who I am every day. There's very little volatility
Mhm.
in emotion. I think work is hard enough in any case. But here's a place where I can be vulnerable. Not every decision that I make is going to be right. If I have to make a decision in the moment, sometimes you have to make it on that 80-20 rule. Sometimes you're going to be wrong. It's really important to say and raise your hand. I was wrong. I need to redirect, or I made a mistake. So I'm not afraid to redirect or self-correct. Better for you to
Mhm.
self-correct than someone else have to like yank your chain. And
Yeah.
I'm also not afraid if I don't have enough information to make a decision, or if I don't know enough about a particular topic, I'm going to seek it out. So if that's a way of being vulnerable, knowing that I'm not the expert all the time at everything, I'm always willing to seek out information. But kind of on the personal level, yeah, I really would not say that I lean into that.
Yeah, going back to what you said, you want to be even kill. You want people to know what they're getting every single day. You can't be coming in one day all happy, happy, let's go, and then the next day, oh, everything sucks. So for me,
Although I've worked for people like that, and that makes work even
it
harder. Like you go
makes
in and you're
work
like,
even harder.
I don't know what kind of Desmond I'm getting today.
Exactly. So and now you got to come in and check the temperature every day. Like, okay, let's kind of wait and see if he's in a good mood. So the reason why for me, I'll be vulnerable and let somebody know because typically 98% of the time I'm going to be the same way. And if I got something that's really bothering me, I don't want people to sit back and wonder, why is he not being himself today?
Yeah.
So I rather let you know up front. So because I personally feel like whatever you are holding in and however you're feeling is generally going to come out in some type of way.
Hmm.
So me personally, I'll let you know, hey, I'm having a bad day. Don't mind me. I may be quiet today. So just so you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Here's where the piece that you talked about us both being men of faith, that's really important because I don't know how people get through it as in work or life without having that. That's where having a mentor is really important. If there's a challenge at work that you're frustrated, that's an outlet. And having friends and family that you can just talk to just for your own mental health and well being.
that's
You and I both met Nasir Bayan, and we talked about um, mental illness, mental wellness, and mental health. Everybody wants to work in the mental health space, and that's where you have to have some outlets.
right. Yeah, because I, if you keep it in, it festers, and then it becomes infected disease. Like that's how I feel about my emotions. I'm one of those people. I gotta talk about it. I gotta come to somebody. I gotta let it out. Usually it's my wife. She's my sounding board. She's my sounding board. She lets me get it out, and then I could go on. It's been many times I call her from work. All right, I just need 10 minutes, and then I'll say what I gotta say, and then I can move on.
There is,
But
I can't remember, like, not everybody, I think I said this earlier too, not everybody needs to know, but somebody needs to know. You always have to
right,
have a go to person or a couple of go to people.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm gonna pivot from that conversation to uh, going back to kind of the conversation we was having. How do you get the best out of people? When I think about leadership, leadership is not about you. Leadership is about what you do for others. So as a leader, I'm always thinking, how can I get the best out of people, not just for my own selfish reasons, but how can I get the best out of people for their own good?
Hmm.
So how do you do that?
I talked already about being self aware. I think you got to be really aware and in tune with your team. So you can't peanut butter it across and be like, this is what's going to inspire the team altogether. There are some people that you have to be more in tune to whatever their emotion might be that day, or what their specific analytical skill set is, or what their strengths are. I think we spend a lot of time, especially year-end reviews. This is kind of that time of the year when you do year-end reviews. And there's some managers that talk about, here are all the things that you did wrong. It's much more inspirational to say, you know what? Let's talk about the things that you did really well. And this is what's going to take you to the next level. And I think that's a lot of the time the way that we're even educated. Like you need to get a tutor when you're not doing really well in this thing or that thing. Not that you don't want to make sure that you don't level up on things, but why don't you lean into someone's particular strengths? There's a book called Strengths Finder. I don't know if you're familiar with
Mhm.
it, but it
Absolutely.
teaches you how to lean into people's strengths. So my way of inspiring people is making sure that I understand aspirations and align it with what their strengths are. And that's how you inspire people, and that's how you get the most out of them. If this is what your aspiration is, and this is what you're really good at, now if they're misaligned, you got to be authentic again and tell people,
Mhm.
yeah, you said that you want to be a chemist, but you're really not good at science. That's not going to work out. But if you understand what someone's aspiration is, or you, even as an athlete, if you see somebody that says, hey, you know what? Yeah, I might go to college only because I want to be a professional football player. You're able to tell really early on if that is just aspirational and not aligned with the skill set. And that's the opportunity to coach them differently. That's what a manager should be. How do you get the most out of people?
Mhm.
Aligning what their aspirations are along with their skill set, and not dwell on things that are purely developmental. I've had bosses that will only say, here's the thing that you did wrong last September. And you're thinking, I don't even remember what that was. Or you
Right.
could spend time being thematic and saying, the way that you present, the way that you are innovative and putting together a presentation is really good. I remember the way that you like helped carry the water for the team when this person was out, and you dug in and you put in extra hours. Those are the sorts of things that I think inspire people. That's how you get them. You want people to want to work for you.
Number one, principles of winning: your name and your word. And you heard me
Absolutely.
talk about this a couple times. That's that's your calling card. That's your brand. When people say Timothy Parker, what does that mean to you? And then what do you feel like that means to other people when they say your name, as far as in the context of being a leader?
There's a few things that I would say might be neat and complimentary. Like generally, people are, oh, they're going to say he's smart. He is collaborative. He is a good team player. Uh, he works really hard. But one of the things that I like to hear, or would like people to think about the most, is he's got a great amount of integrity. If you think you're going to do something wrong or cut corners, it's probably best not to make it revealed to me, because that is completely the antithesis of who I am. So I've got a great amount of integrity. Some might say that I'm the corporate tattletale, but I wouldn't like to say it that way. But I have a great amount of integrity. Yep. Smart is really good. Working hard is really good. Being a great teammate is really good. But like you said, your word, my word is my bond. So integrity is probably the greatest and most important thing that I would like people to know about my reputation.
And I was going to follow up with, how do you develop that? But I think it's pretty easy and self-explanatory to just come up with that on your own. You just do the
Oh
right
yeah, it's
thing.
part of who you are.
Yeah, you do the right
Or not.
thing. Yeah, and then you develop that reputation for, hey, y'all know Timothy always gonna do the right thing. So don't even go
And
to
then
him with
you
no.
learn that along the way in your career, because not everyone that you work for or work with thinks or believes that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So speaking of people that you work for, work with, and it may not even be somebody that you work for or work with, and I'm gonna put you on the spot. You can only name one. Who is that one mentor that you look back, or they may mentor you now and say, this was the most, this was the person that gave me the most positive outlook of how to do things as a leader? What were those things, and why is that person so revered to you? What are the qualities that they have that give you reverence for them?
So I'm going to talk about a manager. I'll say kind of manager, more manager than mentor. And he was my manager the first time I was a manager of people, but I won't even say his name. But going back to a job that I interviewed for, and I remember when we were interviewing, he never once looked down at my resume. Like our conversation was an absolute pretty intense dialogue. And that's when I learned, I was like, what I really liked about that was that he was completely present. So I try to make sure that when I am talking to an employee, whether it's a one on one, whether it's an annual review, whether it's just a conversation, I try to be completely present. And I took that as one of the things I wanted to take when I started managing people, is to be completely present with them. He was always really clear about direction, and didn't hover. Not a, some people are just taskmasters and they need to get an update every day that they're super hands on. I am
Hmm.
very, very hands off. I feel like if I give you direction, we can check in. If you have questions, I absolutely have an open door. So that's the second thing. Some people say they have an open door policy. If there was ever any time that I needed to go in and ask him a question, always available to me. Of course, schedules are busy, but always available, never demeaning, always patient. So that's the other thing. I was like, an open door policy can be authentic or just a nice thing to say.
Hmm.
He was really, I would say, really smart, really hardworking, but never one of those people that was like, that publicly was like, oh my God, I worked 57 hours this week. Oh, really? Well, I worked 62 hours this week. He was never super competitive, but if you really watched, he absolutely put in the hours that were needed and never asked anyone to do more than what he did. I operate the same way. That would be another thing I would say. Don't do as I do, do as I say. Don't try to match me on the hours
Yeah.
that I'm putting in. Don't try to mimic exactly what I'm going to do. But that's the kind of style that I learned and learned for him. I worked for him, Desmond, for probably 2.5, maybe 3 years ago, 20 years ago, in a completely different city. But lo and behold, we end up in the same city in Columbus, Ohio, and we've stayed in touch mostly on LinkedIn, but we actually had dinner right before the holidays and just caught up on what I learned from him. And he's the same authentic, genuine person. And then I told him that I designed a lot of my management style off of just watching, observing, and experiencing him. So if you have someone that you connect with as a leader, a manager, or a mentor, and you can learn from them and develop your style by taking some of the best or following best practices from them, I think that's a blessing. So I had that great opportunity, and he is still stands as in the entirety of my career. Now, hopefully, my boss currently is not watching this. One of the best bosses that I've ever had.
Hey,
Current boss is really high up there too.
you know what? Your boss is probably saying, "I'm glad you met him," because he's probably glad that you're working for him, your current boss,
Yeah,
and you developed into the person that you are because of that guy. I'm just
and I
trying to
got him
smooth. I'm
early
just trying
on
to
in my
smooth it
career.
over for you, just in case he is listening.
Good.
um, I think this may be the last question for me. When we look at today's work environment, how much more important are soft skills, developing those soft skills? How much more important is that today than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago? And the reason that I asked that question is you can develop the technical skills. You can learn how to do all of the CFO work that you know how to do. But I feel like it is shifting where it is more important to have great people skills if you want to move up that corporate ladder. Am I right about that? And what's your thought about the importance of developing soft skills?
I think you're absolutely on target with that. Being a finance nerd, which is what I say I am, I got lots of hard skills, lots of analytical skills, and develop those. When you move further along in your career, it's definitely more important to have really well developed soft skills. But also in the environment that we're in right now, how many times have you and I actually even seen each other in person?
Once,
Probably twice.
twice, yeah, twice, yeah.
And but we've been able to develop a great friendship and relationship by using what technology. It's the same thing at work throughout the day. I have to make sure that my persona and all the things that I said, I got to make sure that my brilliance, my resilience, my authenticity has to come through on screen. I have to use this modem of communication. If you're not really good at soft skills and communicating, how are people ever going to know who you are, how brilliant you are, how resilient you are, or how authentic you are? Super important, especially in this environment when people are really hybrid and far flung, because we don't see each other and we don't get to be in each other's presence in person the same
Hmm.
way and experience each other. So I think we have to communicate, and it becomes more and more important to leverage technology and use the soft skills. So it used to be definitely as you move further on in your career, but now it's a whole different game because we have to be on Teams, we have to be on Zoom, we have to be able to share exactly who we are um, in one dimension.
I thought that was going to be my last question, but I have a follow up. What are the most outside of communication? What is the soft skill that you think people have to develop the most to be successful?
Um, so here's mine. My superpower is I know how to connect people. I'm a connector. So when I saw you at the conference, I was like, this is a person that I have to connect to my organization that's going to be able to speak to the heart of an entire organization. And it really worked out well. So I think you have to identify what your particular superpower is. And great if it's a hard skill that you can do a spreadsheet faster and better than anybody. But again, I can be very analytical, but my superpower is being a connector of people. So that's what my superpower is. And I think leaning into that kind of soft skill, which everyone doesn't necessarily have, is really important. So find out what your superpower is. And if it's a superpower, that means it's superlative to what the average person has.
It's funny that you say connector. I feel like my superpower is connecting with other people. Like how it was just natural. And I
Hmm.
feel like I do that with just about anybody who I run into. Anybody who I spend time with, I feel like I have a unique ability to connect with that person. I'm gonna find a way to connect with that person. My wife told me that's why she married me, because I made her feel comfortable like right away. So I believe that's my unique soft skill is I know how to connect with people and form a bond with people very, very quickly.
Really
Um,
important. I agree with that about you too. I
well,
told you
thank
that. We were all sitting at a table and it was like, he was talking to me. No, he was talking to me.
you.
People are like thinking that you're talking to them.
And I wasn't talking to that table. I was looking to the table behind you guys, looking right over you. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, probably.
Did I leave out anything? Did I forget anything that's important for you that you needed to say?
No, I think this was really good. I think I was able to share messages that I think are important for people to latch on to. A lot of stuff I wish I had heard earlier on in my career. Find a really good mentor. Know that everything isn't linear, and lean into the things that I said. Your brilliance, resilience, and authenticity. Those are all really important things to do, and they will carry you far because it's a journey. Sometimes the journey feels like you're like on an incline. Sometimes there's a plateau for a little while. You might even feel like there's a dip. It probably isn't a dip. It's just a challenge for you to learn something to go to the next level.
Absolutely. And those are your Timothy Parker's principles of winning. Man, I appreciate you coming on, spending a little time with us today. And yeah, man, just great success to you from now until to the end of time. That's all we wish for you, man. So thank you for coming on. Thank everybody else out there for watching. We'll be back on next week, the same time, Wednesdays. So till then, we'll see you later.
Perfect.